Hello, friends. Good afternoon. This is Stephanie Sanders, and today I'd like to share with you a little bit about white fragility and also having conversations, white and people with color. While I'm sharing, please, as you listen, take note of something that you can relate to and maybe one or two things that you've learned today to share in our discussion posts. Okay? So I'll begin with the article White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. She says at the beginning of the article that white people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort, while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress, leading to what she refers to as white fragility. So DiAngelo continues, white fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. And here I invite you to honestly check in and see if you've tried any of these moves. The moves include the outward display of emotions, such as anger, fear, guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and just leaving the situation altogether. These behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. So I'd also like to point out that when DiAngelo says that this insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort, said I don't think that white people, or at least as a white person, I can say that I don't overtly have expectations for racial comfort because it's built into the system. So it's not something that I had to actively, or that I've actively thought about until recently when the discussion of race, and in particular white supremacy, has come to the forefront. So the author identifies this insulation when she observes how whiteness as a privilege and status gets itself surrounded by protective pillows of resources and or benefits of the doubt, and how whites are rarely without these protective pillows, and when they are, and this is important here, it is usually temporary and by choice. This one really stood out for me because I'm choosing to look at whiteness and white-centeredness and my own privilege square in the eye until I don't have to anymore, and then I can choose to look away. That is the epitome of white privilege in my book, and that was a big lesson for me here. I can look away. I can choose to do something else and go to bed at night and not feel that oppression. One really important outcome of the effects of white supremacy on people of color is stress. I don't hear anyone talking about the fact that living in fear under this oppressive force is causing stress-based illness such as obesity, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, depression, and asthma. So have you noticed that during the COVID epidemic, people of color are dying at alarmingly higher rates than whites, almost 5 times higher? The newscasters are attributing this to social factors such as poverty, but no one has had the guts to trace poverty back to its source, that of white supremacy, much less begin a conversation around that. So in the article, Let's Get Real, What People of Color Can't Say and What Whites Won't Ask About Racism, Lee Moonhwa asks, white people, what are some of your fears to bring up the issue of racism with people of color? One person said, when I talk about racism with people of color, my main fear is that I will cause more pain with what I say or do not say. And I'd have to agree with her there. I know this is a topic I'm ignorant about, and I'm afraid of saying something that is my perception but isn't accurate, or worse, is offensive to someone else. I have a couple of friends who lump white people into two categories, those who get it and those who don't. And in my opinion, white people will never fully get it because it's not a lived experience 24/7. We can walk away from it. There's another category, though, white people who want to get it, like myself, and learn how they can become allies with people of color and engage to bring more white people into the conversation in order to effect change. In the article, Amy Fritsch says, in discussing the issues of race and racism with people of color, I have great fear of misstepping or giving offense. I fear displaying my ignorance, of being less informed than I would have hoped to be by this time in my education. I fear using a term incorrectly or offensively. I fear being judged as lacking, being judged as insensitive or unworthy of the conversation and, not even wanting to be bothered with. I fear I will frustrate people of color who so very often are asked to school white folks in issues of race. I fear being seen to ask for them to, quote, speak for all people of color, and no matter how carefully I word my request for sharing, emphasis here, I generally ask, and this is a good one, do you have time or energy to share with me your own perspective on your experience with this? I have learned to use that wording to try to show respect for the fact that it's not the ongoing job of people of color to school me. So that's a real important one, I think, of being respectful in that light. And the author says, if you could say 3 things to people of color about racism, what would you say? One gal said, I'm not the bad guy. I'm trying to change the way I think and be open to knowing me and allowing me to get to know you beyond the surface. The author also asks, what would be some questions you'd like to ask people of color? One is, can we be friends? Or what attributes of your heritage and culture do you find most valuable? Or can you think of ways that a white person's words or actions have had a positive impact and that I might want to consider emulating those? And now we switch turns here. The question, what would it take for you to feel safe enough to tell the truth about race to white folks? Kai Lockhart says that a discussion about racism can only go so far. The action that takes place after the topic is discussed is what is truly paramount. So I really felt her passion in that, and yet she doesn't specify any action, so it leaves one wondering, what can white people do that would help her to feel safe enough to tell the truth? Other people shared, for instance, Helen Yee says, to hear my story fully without judgment, without fear, but with curiosity and search for truth and clarity and honesty. To be okay to express my anger, fears, frustrations, and resentments, and for me to be able to hear white's fears, anger, and frustrations, and questions. A common thread here was being punished, particularly in the workplace, for speaking the honest truth and therefore not feeling safe to do so. In order to feel safe and have more people of color backing them up, as well as white allies who are willing to speak on their behalf if the conversation goes awry. I particularly resonated with Carol Walsh, quote, in a perfect world, an acknowledgement of the emotional pain and fear that I live with daily would make me feel safe. I weep over the helplessness that I feel with regards to my children's experience of racism, both real and perceived. I feel pain from the disrespect and disregard I experience because of my race. I can't even get to the multiple wonderful parts of me because I must first deal with the reactions, both good and bad, to my Blackness. I really loved hearing her words there. And then finally, I think Razia Kosi hit it on the head when she said, connecting with each other and each other's experiences is fundamental to entering the conversations about race and racism. She also suggests that it can be useful to use tools like these readings for discussion, for instance, but also films and perhaps some ice-breaking activities or community-building activities when engaging in conversations. So for this, I've included at the end, I'll conclude that I've included a 4-minute video of Muhammad Ali talking about white Jesus and other white things, which I feel free to use as an icebreaker. I think laughter really helps to loosen people up and feel connected, because when we are all laughing together, we are truly in that oneness. So thank you so much for listening. I'll post the questions to add to the discussion, but I hope you've taken some notes so far. Thank you. Bye.